Welcome back to the Einstein Bots for Salesforce Admins video series. In this video, I'm going to talk about entities and variables. As a Salesforce admin, you're probably already somewhat familiar with what a variable is. We'll go ahead and create some just for the sake of seeing this in action, and then we'll reference these with our entities as we start to build out an example of how this all pieces together within a dialog. So first things first, if we come over here, we'll go to variables. We can see that there's already some that have been created out of the box. You can reference these as you're building out your dialogues. Let's go ahead and add a new one here. And we're going to call this item 1. I'm going to actually not put any spaces in there because I'm going to use this in a flow later. And this is going to be a text variable. But you can see there's some other options here. So we have text, number, Boolean, so true, false. You can reference an actual object, date, time, currency, and an ID. Text should do the trick for what we need here. I'll also do another one for item var 2. Actually be item 2 var, just to match the naming convention of the first one. Again, we'll do text. And let's do one for quantity. Quantity 1 var, make that a number, and quantity 2 var, again a number. That way when we're using these variables for our restaurant use case that we're talking about here, we can say for item 1 I want pizza, and I want 1 pizza. Item 2, I want ice cream, and I want 2 ice creams. So now we have those 4 variables that we can now use in that situation. Variables, they're kind of the same as what you would use really anywhere else in Salesforce, whether that's flows or really anything else that you're doing. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that, but I do want to talk about entities because these are they're not necessarily tricky, but they're a little bit of a challenge to initially wrap your head around. I'm hoping that by the time you're done watching this video, entities will make sense when you're using them with variables. So again, we have some entities that are already out of the box. The interesting thing about entities is with entities, we can define what our variables are allowed to be. So for instance, this entity, this Boolean one, whatever variable we're using with this Boolean entity is going to be true or false. Same thing with this date entity. Any variable that's being used in conjunction with this date entity is going to be a date field. So for instance, if we wanted to create a variable specific to our delivery day for our order, or for our order that we're creating in our hypothetical use case here, we would use either the date or probably more likely the date time entity to determine what that variable can be. So let's kind of take this a step further, and hopefully this will make a little bit more sense. We're going to talk about our menu. Let's call this restaurant, and I can't spell to save my life. Restaurant menu. So when we create this entity, we've got a couple different options for the type. It can either be a pattern using regex, so that would be like your date or your date time, or we can make it a list of values. I'm going to use values in this instance so that we can define what our restaurant menu is. So now we have our entity down here for restaurant menu. If we actually go into it, now we see a value list. And the value list is where we'd actually determine the constraints that we're putting on this entity. We're going to make this a pretty awesome restaurant where the menu consists of pizza, ice cream, and instead of doing ice cream twice, let's say cookies, because I am a child at heart. So we have our initial values here, and then our alternate values are where if somebody types something similar but not quite the same, then you can still, the bot will still understand it as whatever the actual value is that you're going for here. So for instance, pizza, there's some different names or different slang. So we can call it za. We can call it, let's say I'm crazy and I really don't know how to spell. Let me turn caps lock off here. Pete, za. Or maybe I just don't put the second Z in there, so it's pizza. Same thing with cookies. And then ice cream, we'll just say, we'll call it shaved ice. Obviously, those are very different things, but for the sake of this demo, ice cream and shaved ice, we'll say are the same thing. So we'll go ahead and save that. And now, anytime that we're using this entity, these values, whether it's ice cream, pizza, ice cream, cookie, or pizza, or any of the alternate values, those are the limits that can be populated to our variable. So what does this actually mean? Let's go ahead and jump into our dialogues. And I'm going to do the create a new order dialog. We're going to send a message saying, great, I can help with that. And then we are going to ask a question. So our question is going to be, let's say how many, no, let's say, what can I get for you? Or what would you like? So now we can add our choices. So in this instance, our options would be pizza, cookies, or single cookie in this case, ice cream. We are going to limit what the values that our variable is populated with our restaurant menu variables, with our restaurant menu entity. And we're going to say item 1. And let's take a step back here. So we have 2 display choices. First is our display choice as buttons. So we see these are just rounded buttons, or you can make it an actual menu. Again, it really depends on how you want this thing to look and feel. I'll go with buttons in this case, just we don't need a menu here. And then, so recognize input format and save answer to the variable basically means that if the person interacting with your bot types a message or types something, then that can be used to save. We'll go ahead and check that in this case. That way, you can just kind of see it in action. There's different ways to do this. So for instance, if you had a text variable that you were saying, like, what's the issue with your order, they could then put in like pizza was cold or whatever. So it doesn't necessarily limit it that way. So down here we have if the variable already has a value, whether to skip the question and use the existing value or to ask the question and overwrite the value. Since we're creating an order, I would say let's ask the question and overwrite the value. So if I wanted to create 6 orders from one chatbot session, I could do that. You also have the option to add a repair attempt. Basically, if what the person is saying doesn't match what the entity's limits are, then you can try to sort that out. I'm not going to worry about that for this demo, just because that's a little bit more advanced. It's not terribly difficult, but just something that you can do. So let's go ahead and save this. And then let's go ahead and ask another question, which would be how many, and then I'm going to actually reference our variable. So that was item 1 var. And my format is not correct because I need an exclamation point there. Would you like? So basically what's going to happen is the person's going to say they want pizza or cookie or ice cream, and then whatever's in that variable will be referenced in this question. So our entity in this case is going to be a number. And the variables that are available to us are our 2 number variables that we have. In this case, we're going to use quantity 1 variable. Ask question override, save it. All right, so let's go ahead and activate and preview. I'm going to preview this as rich content. And I already have my embedded service connection there. So we're going to click on chat with an expert. And we can start to see this bot in action. So, hi, I'm DemoBot, a digital assistant. That's our welcome message. Next, it's going to show the main menu. What can I help you with today? And then it shows the menu. So that's right in line with what we want. Next is we're going to create a new order. So if I come over here to create a new order, this is what I should see. So we should have great, I can help with that. What would you like? Now let's say instead of clicking on one of these options, I type za. And now we can see basically because our alternate value within our entity was za, the bot understood I'm talking about pizza. That's what I should populate in item 1 variable. How many pizzas would I like? Let's say 2. And because I don't have a next step defined, we're waiting for customer input. This isn't going to go anywhere. So this is how our bot's going to sit. So this is just a really general kind of high level idea of how this all pieces together. Now that our bot is active, I have to deactivate it before I can make any more changes. I'm going to go ahead and deactivate it. Since we're talking about activating and deactivating our bot, make sure that whatever endpoint you're using is one that you're okay with having a chat bot sit on for a minute. Anytime that you're activating it, you can create a endpoint and just have it point to that without any issues, without interacting with any people while you're testing, and then later on save it or update it to one that you actually want the bot on. One other thing to show you over here in dialogues, we can create a new dialogue or a new dialogue group. So a new dialogue is literally just another one of these line items that we're building things in. A dialogue group is, let's say, if there's an issue with an order, then I've got 6 different dialogues that all string together. I may want to put those in a group. That way, as I'm trying to navigate which dialogue goes to which thing, it's easier for me to understand and kind of wrap my head around. It's more of an organizational thing than anything else. It doesn't actually impact the routing of the different chats, but that is something that you can use as needed. So that's that for entities and variables and a very basic high level. Let's start stringing this stuff together. The next video, I'm going to discuss creating a custom object and how we can start to quantify the impact this chatbot's having. So for instance, if the chatbot is interacting with 700 people this week, not only will we know that the chatbot's interacted with 700 people, but we'll also, once we start using flows within our chatbot, we'll be able to understand how people are actually interacting with the bot. So maybe that's, of the 700 interactions with people that the chatbots had this month, 400 of those were creating a new order. 250 of them were, what's the status of my order, and 50 of those were issues. Some really powerful stuff that's really not that hard to build into your bot. It just takes a few extra steps. So thanks for tuning in. Make sure to like and subscribe. Tune into the next video to learn more about that custom object. Thanks.